So yeah, the title is Dead and Don't Know It, and it was a hook to try to get people to come. When when I thought about the talk, it's basically the trends that we see talking to so many different game developers, and some of them, frankly, are a little disturbing. And a lot of the topics touch upon the previous talk as well, which is how the industry's changed, and to some extent, game developers don't seem to be changing fast enough. When I told friends and other folks what the name of my talk was, they kind of thought I was talking about this, where I guess it's, are you undead and don't know it? But really what I'm talking about is this general theme that game developers seem to have, that they're going to have the next rocket ship. Don't worry about it. I'm going to put my app in the App Store. I'm going to become the next Angry Birds. I don't need any help. I'm on my own. And in reality, what seems to be happening is you go up for a little bit, and then you didn't have a plan, and now you got a problem. And you're not going to sustain any success that you find. And so when you are building these games, game developers are having heaped upon them so much responsibility that they need to think about where they're going to go from here. And in general, it seems like the thought process is, hey, I'm going to get a bunch of my buddies, we're going to go down, we're going to make some games, it's going to be great. And yet, at the end of the day, this isn't a hobby in that regards. Your job is to make a business that's going to sustain and be successful. That doesn't mean that you don't have creativity. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't make good products. But it doesn't seem like there's enough focus on the certain aspects. Now, I will promise this is the ugliest slide that I have, and I wish it would be better. But this is the way that we think of the engine of how you're going to be successful. Of course, customer acquisition is number one. There's a tremendous war going on for customer acquisition right now, and I'll talk about some of the aspects of that. The next war, frankly, is going to be over retaining users. There's a lot of fractured markets out there, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, you need to monetize. But the key is, it's not a funnel, it's an engine. A funnel mentality is a very retail model of, I got to find users, I got to sell them a box product, and then I did my job, I'm done. The idea now is to try to have game players think of your game and create a habit of playing your game so that you can increase monetization over time and try to retain them. This will open up other opportunities for monetization if you can retain your audience. So first off, user acquisition. For the record, I will state, I think app stores are one of the worst distribution mechanisms known to man. I'll just go ahead and put it out there. Now, I also say that if you think it's a democratic process to have the cream rise to the top, I will point out we have Disney, a previously successful game, Disney, an app, and Disney. So I don't know if that's really the most democratic aspect. I'm not saying these are bad games. These are actually good games. But I'm just saying that that is the pinhole that you can see the ocean of content that is behind an app store. There are literally hundreds of thousands of apps, and when you make a decision to go into an app store, this is basically what you're presented with. And so keep in mind that you're not just going to rise to the top on your own unless you win the lottery. And if you do, awesome, good on you, but there's 999 other people that didn't win the lottery. Also, you're just that crate in the big warehouse, right? There's no one at the storefront that is really looking out for you when it comes to an app store. One of the reasons why you may see big names be on the top 25 is that they do have a relationship with the app stores. They can get marketing, they can be included in commercials. And again, maybe, Deus Ex Machina style, the hand comes down and says, you get to be in a commercial. But in general, that doesn't happen. So app stores, of course, have bound together all the policy controls that guys like Apple, guys like Google and others desire, which is not just software control, but they also want to control the monetization and the commerce and take a 30% tax. So this is not an easy problem to solve, but I need to dissuade developers who think that an app store is a great distribution model because it's direct to consumer. It's not. There's no one that's looking out for you in that regards. You're just a box in a warehouse. Now, CPI, cost per install. This is a very, very hot topic, and there's actually kind of two knock-on effects about CPI that come into play that game developers should be aware of. The first is that the customer acquisition costs are spiraling out of control. Right? This is latest information to insane levels. This is an article that highlights the fact that the guys who are incredibly cash rich are coming in and paying dumb money in order to get consumers to get their app. What that does is it removes that opportunity for you to pay money in order to get users unless you have lots of dollars. The reason why it spirals out of control is that it's an auction process. An auction process is, okay, who's going to pay the most amount? That's what they're designed to do. When you sell a piece of art, it's about getting the maximum amount of dollars. And so with the limited amount of inventory that's out there, the auction bidding system is going to raise those costs to the highest level. And to some extent, you're looking at this type of equation. This is kind of the way we think of it. This is highly simplistic, but basically LTV, long-term value or lifetime value of a consumer. What's the maximum amount of money that you're going to make from a consumer? Okay, that's your positive number. What's your cost of goods? 30% tax, how much it costs you to make it, et cetera, right? So you're going to be paying that and so forth. But the customer acquisition number, that's the variable cost in a CPI model. That's the thing that continues to scale up. If you have a $7 download or something crazy like that, it's going to be very difficult for you to have a profit. So to some extent, this equation is starting to look increasingly like it's going to be 0 or less than 0 if developers only think that they're going to be spending money on a cost per install basis. So we've seen this before, right? One of the trends is that history repeats itself over and over again. You just have different names and players in the space. This is pretty much identical to the search engine marketing market that Google brought to play with AdWords, right? They had keywords that let the bidding process go to the highest level. If it was something that was a class action lawsuit keyword, you would have a cost per click that would be $30, $40, $50. Why? Because that's kind of the maximum margin dollar that the law firm would be willing to pay per user that would go in. If it's something that's a little bit more mass market, maybe we'll set it a little bit lower. But it is literally designed to take away the maximum amount of margin dollars from a developer. Same thing is happening with cost per install. So you have a choice. We talk a lot about time-rich and cash-rich, and we usually mean end users. We usually mean, hey, the 15-year-old kid that's got no money, but he's got nothing but time, how do we monetize them? Versus the 35-year-old guy who's got, doesn't have a lot of time but has a credit card. What I thought would be interesting is to change that into a distribution choice, which is, are you cash-rich or time-rich? Or to some extent, hopefully you're both. From a cash-rich perspective, you can go spend money on CPI, you can go spend money on banner ads, and go ahead and take that risk up front. But there seems to be this resistance from developers with regards to time-rich, which kind of boggles my mind. Time-rich is if you can find partnerships, right? For example, we happen to be one, there's others, but partners that will basically do a rev split with you means there's no cash upfront risk for you, co-risk, you guys work together and go find an audience. Another aspect would be something like Kickstarter, right? You have plenty of time to try to get the users and pre-sell it. You could try to do marketing campaigns in order to acquire users in advance. And that's another thing to make a note of, is that what seems to have changed is that in the past, it was about building up demand for your product, have previews, have posters. It was a very, I'm going to get everyone ready to buy my game on August 1st or whatever the date is. But what you have to realize is that a person has to be walking into a store and be guided to buy that product in order for that education to make sense, where they go, aha, that's the product I wanted, I'm going to pick it up. That doesn't happen in an app store. No one is being ushered into an app store. They just kind of go on their own volition. It's better to think about, I'm going to try to acquire my audience ahead of time. What that means is getting a touch point, get a marketing channel so that you can actually talk to them and send the game, whatever you can do that in advance of your product being available, and you're going to find more success rather than just relying on a cost per install model. Now, another aspect of CPI is that there are two variables in play that I think are going to impact CPI. One of them is, we call it the VC Lazy Susan, right? Everyone knows what a Lazy Susan is. It's that thing in the middle of a big table that you put the ketchup on and spin it so that you don't have to pass things left and right? So you got this Lazy Susan. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think about it, if you're spending CPI dollars, if you're acquiring users, they're coming from somewhere. They're probably coming from an app that's not making money any other way. So if you got funded by a VC or an investor, you're giving that money to the next guy. Well, if he can't monetize users, then he's got to spend the money to get users, and the money goes around and around and around and around. The issue is that at some point, VCs are going to start to pull back, because if the inherent monetization of the product is low, eventually they're going to say, you know what, maybe we're going to hold on our investments, and this Lazy Susan's going to stop. Music stops, there aren't any more chairs for you to sit down, and there's going to be an issue. Now, does that mean that CPI is going to go away? Of course not. It's a valid mechanism, but keep in mind that at some point you have to make money directly from consumers, not relying on this. The other thing is the deflector shield. And this is something that we are hearing firsthand from the top game developers. If you think about it, in the early stages of a game developer's life or a game's life, they'll kind of do whatever it takes to make money. I'll do whatever it takes. And then at some point, maybe they're one of the lucky guys and they get into the top 100, top 50, and they're like, you know what, I don't like my users leaving to go play another game. I don't like those ads. I don't like those, go install this other app. I'm not going to do those anymore because it's better for me to acquire my audience, which means the inventory is progressively going to go lower and lower because keep in mind, it's the top guys that have the inventory. And this is something that we've heard firsthand from some of the top mobile game developers right now with regards to CPI. Now, user retention. So we talked a little bit about how do we get users. Now we're going to talk about how to keep the user. The good news, especially when it comes to mobile, time spent on mobile apps is increasing. People are getting more comfortable spending time with apps rather than versus just the web normally. So that's the good news, right? Here's the bad news. The bad news is that that time is being consolidated into the top 50 apps. As we talked about earlier, there are hundreds of thousands of applications out there in the app stores, but only the top 50 dominate the time spent. So you got 58% plus of your time that's being spent in a very, very small number of apps. The rest are completely separated in a long tail type of situation. The other issue is that we are getting better, but users are leaving. They'll try an app, I'm gonna try it a little bit, nothing. Okay, here are your users that are actually using it more than 10 times. Okay, now they've reached that habit level of the game, they're trying to play the game. They're not just gonna leave out of the gate. So you better have a strategy on how you're gonna retain users, right? We've seen, as was mentioned earlier, we've seen some social games do a good job of this, which is, hey, wait, don't leave. Problem is that in a web environment, that's an easier thing to do because the user is sitting down, they're looking at their screen, and they can have tabbing to do multiple things at once. When a phone call comes in, you're leaving. That's it. Also, you press the button, you're gone. There's nothing that the app can do in order to get the user to stay. So what this boils down to is this is a war for touch points. A lot of people think I just get my user and it's great. It's not. It's about getting a touch point that the user will create a habit to launch. So this thing is pages and pages and pages. One of the downsides of being a game is that you get your own touch point. And I know that may seem blasphemous because isn't it a great thing to get your own touch point? The answer is no, because you're creating more proliferation of touch points. You're fracturing the user's focus with regards to what they're going to use. So you're basically nothing but a little island. Everyone is their own little island on their own, trying to figure out how to get the user to come back. Whereas if we were music and movies, you can have services that are a touch point that will capture the user on content consumption and try to move them over into discovery with regards to new content. As a side note, one of the ways that we design our products at Wild Tangent is to blend these two together so that when a user goes to play the game, we can redirect them to discover new games. Now, these are two of my kids, so Halloween, so I had to pull it in. But the note is that games are getting more creative in how they can create out-of-game communication channels. So in this example, we have a game that has a notification to me that's saying, hey, you should come back and play this game. It's a daily reward. It's an incentivized thing, but at least they're trying with regards to saying, I'm going to try to reach out and get you to come back into and play the game. I'm trying to retain you because I've noticed you haven't been there. So that's a good strategy. The other thing is trying to get additional aspects. So liking on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. These are all incentivized, which seems to be the initial strategy to go at these things, which is I'm just going to pay you, just get the touch point. So they're not self-directed for the consumer, but they're better than nothing. Right? There's a whole host of strategies that you can do with regards to trying to get communication with the consumer. This should be a big aspect of your game plan because retention is going to be the next war. Right? Acquisition is happening now, but things are being bidded up to the point of all the margin dollars going away. Once that happens, you need to retain the users that you're paying lots of money for. Okay, monetization with a Z. So we'll do that. It seems like developers think that they have this big fork in the road decision. Am I going to make a game where I'm going to sell things to consumers, which makes them feel better from an artist perspective, or am I just going to make some game and it's going to be free with advertising and I'll just throw my hands up and I'll make money? And one of the things that we found is that you don't have to choose. One of the best ways, this is a little secret, one of the best ways to make money off advertising is to have something that you charge for. And I'll show you a little bit about how that works. Having something that's free that you slap ads on is not going to get you good ads. Having something that you pay money for and invite advertisers in, that's the way to go about it. And you need to think of it. We hear about whale hunting all the time, right? I'm going to sell to these users that want to spend so much money with me because my product is so great. Aren't I great? Is my product great? Well, you're really talking about a sub 5%, 5% if you're lucky, right? I'm talking about mass market, not kind of out of the gate, I got a bunch of users and my friends to convert. I'm talking about mass market, high numbers. You're really talking about 5%. Well, the 95% plus, that's krill, but you make it up in volume and you could make a lot more money that way. As a side note, we see a healthy amount of our money come from consumers and a very similar amount come from advertisers because we have this blended approach of we want to maximize revenue, we don't want to maximize the transaction, right? And that's a subtle difference between the two. So advertising is bad, right? Don't ads suck? This is on Gama Sutra just the other day, and it really does capture the way that it seems that most game developers think about advertising. I hate ads. Ads hurt my product. They don't work. I'm never, ever, 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 ever going to click on an ad. Why would I put an ad on my product? I don't make any money. Well, they do suck if they look like this. So there's a fair point there. But that's not what I mean. There's a difference between advertising and ads, and here's an example. So the type of the ad matters. This is something we talked about yesterday in the keynote, which is the difference between brand advertising and direct response. It does not mean that a video ad has a brand in it. An ad for, a video ad for Get Netflix is not necessarily a brand ad. A brand ad is based on the metric and what the advertiser cares about. So here's an example. An Omega watch associated with the Apollo program, go to the moon, isn't it great, whole story, emotional aspect tied to something that you wear on your wrist. This guy's a street hawker that just says $7.99, buy now, buy now, buy now, buy now. Click, 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 give me your money, give me your money. That's a direct response ad. This is a brand ad. There's a very, very big difference between the two. And if you look at what a brand advertiser versus a direct response care about, brand advertisers care about engaging the user. That's just a fancy word that says they want to sit down and have a conversation with the user. Direct response, they just care about the user clicking. Just click right now. The brand advertiser wants to talk about changing your intent about their service or product. Coke and Ford know you are not going to buy a car or a can of Coke right now. I can't get a can of Coke through my machine. I'm not going to buy a Ford right now. Direct response, conversion. I want you to buy this workout video right now so I can send it to you in the mail. The brand wants to have scale. They want to talk a big audience, but they want to have the share of voice. That's terminology that means they want to be the only one having the conversation with the consumer. It's why you don't run more than one ad during primetime TV. Direct response, doesn't care. Tonnage. Show me that you got billions and billions and billions of impressions. I really don't care about the quality of that. The brand is looking to have lift. They want to see things increase, the lift of the intent, the lift of the brand awareness. Whereas direct response, they just care about revenue. How much money did I make through you? The brand advertisers, and this is another thing, important thing to understand, they basically buy on a CPM basis or eCPM basis. So basically something like, I want millions of impressions. Direct response, hey, look, I'll just bid whatever it takes until I get to that margin dollar amount that I'm willing to pay because I just care about revenue. So at the end of the day, the brand advertiser wants to tell a story. Direct response advertiser just wants to take your user's money and have them leave the game. Remember that deflector field aspect. Brand advertisers do not want the user to leave your product because they want to be associated with your product. You have a good product, they want to be inside of it. Direct response, they want the user to leave your game right now. They want to disaggregate your audience. Okay, and also, just to really hammer home the point, these guys seem to like brand advertising, and this is a pretty good TV show. And I don't know about, what was it, season 3? That was kind of weird, but anyway. They got $900,000 for a 30-second spot. So brand advertising shouldn't be something that's looked down upon. It should be looked as an equal opportunity with regards to revenue generation. And for clarity, I'm not talking about this. There's nothing wrong with this, but I'm not talking about an in-game product placement, right? That rarely makes sense. Can make sense here, Jeep goes in there, but you couldn't put another car in there. Makes sense in those racing NASCAR games. But in general, in-game product placement will break the fiction of your game, and that's what game developers think of what we're talking about. We're not. We're talking about inviting the user to see brand advertisement in exchange for value, but not in a currency incentivized aspect of things. And that's a topic for another day with regards to details. Last topic, really quickly, a theme that we hear a lot. I call it dollar for dollar. What I mean by that is developers go, if I have this product that I make in my game, this little sword, and I charge $1, I better always get $1 when I sell this. That's because I say this is $1. Well, in a digital sense, there's no cost of goods for all intents and purposes. So thinking about it as dollar for dollar is the wrong way to go about it. This is a stock chart. If you know the company, you can recognize it. It is going down and to the right, but I'm just saying. The point is that this is what people are willing to pay for that stock at any moment's notice. It goes up, it goes down. So what does that translate to? When it comes to selling things, when you maximize it for the individual, you sell one product and you maximize the transaction amount. But when you're selling with regards to advertising, you're selling wholesale. That's the better way to think about it. Because if you think about it as, if I get $1 for this, I better get $1 for each one of those, the amount of revenue that you're going to bring in is going to shrink because the advertiser is not going to pay the money for that. What you should do is say, if I sell one of these to 5% of my audience and I sell a whole bunch of those to 95% of my audience, that wasn't going to give me $1 for this anyway. If I make $1 or more, I should be indifferent. I'm maximizing my revenue. I'm actually not cratering my economy, which seems to be the standard knee-jerk response that we hear, which isn't the right way to go about it. Last note, SDK fatigue. This seems to be another trend, an emerging trend, especially with mobile games, because mobile game developers, if you don't realize it, you're now download developers, just like we were in the PC space a few years ago. And so download size is important. Also, update rate now being controlled by policies of app stores get in your way, which is radically different than a social game. A social game, put in an SDK, see if it works and goes away. So I hear this a lot. I'll do it later. Once I have an audience, I'll do it later. Problem is that you may not be able to address your audience because you could have a 20 to 50%, if you're lucky, update rate of consumers. I have a version of Angry Birds on my phone. I have no idea how old it is. I have no intention of ever updating it, right? So keep that in mind, that it's better to think about it in advance than it is to have this continual, fatigue of, oh gosh, you're asking me to integrate another SDK. I hear that all the time. Well, how else are you going to monetize things in your games? Don't get me wrong, it's a massive problem. There's a lot of fractured markets. It does increase download size, so I hear you in that regards, but keep in mind that that could be the difference of sustainable success and not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. I think we have time for one or two questions for Matt, if the audience has any questions.
If not, I'll take jokes. Yeah. Hi.
I'll trade you.
Well, you said, you pointed at tendency. Well, branded advertising is much better than DR, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty straightforward.
Sure.
On the other hand, seeing at the tendency of where the dollars are put, there's a tendency to go to DR.
Right.
The budgets are going to DR and not to brand advertising. So how do you
merge those two?
Exactly.
Yeah, since the topic is an emerging trend topic, see how I tied that back in? It's completely...
You rock, man. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I try. It's completely fair to say that direct response is going to be the first beachhead in a new platform. And if you go back in time and look at ESPN in the 80s when they were brand new, they did not have brand advertising. They had buy this exercise machine, buy this, buy this, buy this. Direct response, since they only care about revenue, they're first. Brand advertising needs to hold back because it's their brand. Once their brand is tarnished, they have a problem. So they wait for platforms to emerge, and that's why brand advertising is going through social right now, and it's also now just ramping up with regards to mobile. So it is fair to say that the budget aspects are shifting, but at the end of the day, $70 billion was spent on primetime advertising, primetime TV advertising, $70 billion. You can't give me a valid argument that games on a phone or games on a computer that a user engages with is not a better vehicle for brand advertising. I will not accept any argument that that's not the case. So why is it not there? I wish it was more, but there is a lot coming, and it's now time to think about how to incorporate brand advertising into the games because that trend will continue. But you're absolutely right, the buckets aspect, but keep in mind the games industry has been hit with 2 platform changes at once, which I don't think has happened for ever. right? We got hit with social and we got hit with mobile pretty much at the same time, right? Those two waves are crashing at different times. In the past, it was from arcade to console to PC, and that usually it's been a one platform shift. This has been a two platform shift. So, things will settle in. Make sense? Cool.
Any other questions for Matt? Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.